And welcome back to this final session of the Future Drought Fund Science to Practice Forum. By the time we wind up in a couple of hours' time, we'll have been on air, online for the better part of 24 hours, give or take. And I know there's been lots of conversations in the comments section and a lot of reaching out to each other. And it's a bit old lang syne this afternoon, but keep reaching out. We've got a new poll up, have a look at that. Lots of things going on. We've got a bit of interactivity still to come when our friends at Alluvium come up in around about an hour's time. We'll be discussing the National Drought Resilience Research and Adoption Investment Plan, and Alluvium are going to reflect on the priorities and innovations that have arisen out of our discussions of the last 3 days, and there will be interactivity. So I'm giving you an early heads up that have your devices and laptops ready, because Alluvium are going to link to another platform called Mural. You don't have to do anything just yet, but just have those to hand. We've had 6 hubs. We've got 2 more to go, and then we'll have the full set. And our penultimate visit to a hub is the one in Victoria. And let's take a little overview of what they are getting up to.
The best time to be working on drought is before you're in drought conditions.
Historically, when we've been dealing with drought, we deal with the community or the farming sector, and we don't often bring those collaborative solutions together.
I think that's what makes the Victorian approach so unique, is that we'll be able to identify the priorities regionally and solve them collectively.
I haven't seen a project from a Victorian perspective that is so collaborative and has such great coverage of Victoria.
The strength of our hub is the partnership that we've put together to work on drought resilience in Victoria. We've got 4 universities, Deakin, Federation, La Trobe and the University of Melbourne, and we've got Agriculture Victoria. We've got 5 regional nodes. Each node is being led by a key organisation in that region. They're closely linked to all of their stakeholders, and they will be doing the consultation.
The regional nodes bring that grassroots element to the Victorian hub. Because they are representing their own region, they understand what their key issues are. What the Birchip Cropping Group is so excited about is the opportunity to work with such a range of different people from a whole range of different areas.
Through a quadruple helix of government, academia, industry and the community means we are guaranteed to get the most high impact that we can for rural and regional Victoria.
Agriculture Victoria will bring to the hub 2 main things. The first is our smart farms across Victoria aligned to the different industries. The second main area that we will bring is our extensive networks across Victoria.
It will also enable us, the universities, Agriculture Victoria, to be working with them on statewide functions around knowledge brokering, around digital technologies and sharing of good ideas between the nodes, node-to-node learning. But we will undoubtedly identify gaps in our knowledge, and that will require research. But what we want to make sure is that the research clearly addresses important gaps in relation to building drought resilience.
There are 3 stages of drought and each require different management. We need to take into consideration coming into drought, managing our businesses throughout drought, and then running our businesses as we emerge from drought into a better season.
All too often what we see in the past is that if there's no money on the farm, then the local town also suffers. We want to try to break that nexus between what happens on the farm and what happens in those communities. And so that really means that looking at the potential for diversification.
The work of the hub and the nodes address not only the on-farm implications, but how can we also prepare our communities to be more resilient in times of drought? And then, of course, how will our landscapes in our own unique environments manage and be resilient through drought conditions?
In the farming sector, with the changing climate, you know, the traditional owners have been here for 40,000 years. They have knowledge that we haven't even started to tap into. Through this hub, we actually have a mechanism to ensure that not only are their voices heard, but their ideas are actually acted on.
Having the regions identify their own problems and potentially their own solutions will no doubt have a direct impact on how quickly some of these new innovations are adopted.
One of the biggest barriers to adoption is the change management process. Now, what this hub and the resources enable us to do is actually walk with people beside them to de-risk that change process.
For Victorian communities to be the centre, it certainly will shape how innovation looks like for drought, cross-industry, cross-sector, cross-supply chain.
We don't want more of the same. We want innovation. We want to see new ways of addressing drought resilience. And we think that with the team that we've put together, that we can do that.
And if you're wondering where Dookie is, if you're watching interstate, it's a lovely spot, about 25 minutes drive out of Shepparton. And when the canola's out, it is a glorious place to be, I can assure you. And there, gloriously, Professor Tim Reeves, may I say, all the hubs have had to adapt to COVID and what it means with our restrictions. Victoria was early adapters and have been flexible throughout. So, Tim, our penultimate hub, over to you, and for the first and only time, I'm going to say in my career, over to Dookie.
Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to Dookie, everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional owners of the country, their elders past and present and emerging, and for their ongoing custodial care of this place. This includes the Yorta Yorta, but also to the near south, the Tuangwarong people of the Kulin peoples. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed our video. My presentation is unashamedly going to be about the Victoria Drought Hub. I'm not going to be talking about Victorian agriculture. Most of you would know that Victoria accounts for about 3% of the land area and around a quarter of Australia's gross value of agricultural production. But drought is a very real thing in Victoria. The ABARES report on drought risk last year said these two things. Victoria has the highest level nationally of flow-on effects of drought to household incomes, highest levels of industry and community dislocation. Northern Victoria, which is where we are now, is among only 4 regions in Australia at the highest level of drought risk nationally. And therefore, our hub, we're looking to look at drought resilience in all of the regions, across all of the key agricultural production systems, natural resource environments, regional communities, and with that, of course, the regional businesses exposed to the effects of drought. Our hub design includes 5 nodes, and you can see them there, a Gippsland node, southwest, northwest irrigated horticulture, northeast. Each one of those nodes is being led by a tried and trusted organisation in those communities. And that's one of the real strengths of our hub design. In addition to the nodes, we also have a very strong team around statewide issues. We've got 4 universities. We have Federation, we have Deakin, we have La Trobe, we have the University of Melbourne, we have Agriculture Victoria, and of course our partnership, key partnership with the Australian government. In addition to those main partners, we've also got affiliates, a number. Those bars on the left there, the length of them, records the numbers of each one, but we've got many, many people who want to be and are integrally involved with this hub, and many of whom are making direct contributions to it. So I talked about the hub structure and the nodes. Those nodes are going to be absolutely critical in relation to the regional consultation and co-design and priority setting processes, regional delivery, and also a key part of node-to-node learning. And as I said before, these node leaders are absolutely respected organisations there, and with their own networks. So Food and Fibre Gippsland, led by Nicola Perro, Southern Farming Systems by Scott Churnside, Birchip Cropping Group by Fiona Best, the Mallee Regional Innovation Centre, Rebecca Wells, and Riverine Plains, Catherine Marriott. Through their networks, they will engage with all of the other key players in each part of Victoria as we go to this co-design priority setting process, and then, of course, delivering some solutions. In addition to the nodes, we have the universities. Obviously, a key part here will be the collaboration between the universities and between the universities and the other partners. The universities will be heavily involved in that consultation and priority setting process with the regions and statewide. And critically, the universities will be helping to deliver statewide key support services. And this is a critical part of our hub structure. So the University of Melbourne, my co-director, Professor Ruth Nettle, who couldn't be with us today, knowledge brokering from Deakin with Professor Rebecca Lester, Associate Professor Helen Thompson from Federation, leading these support services around digital platforms, and at La Trobe University, Associate Professor James Hunt and Dr. Tim Clune, looking at leading capacity building and education. And I think one of the things I want you to note there is that this is a real team effort. You know, we haven't kept all of these functions and services within the University of Melbourne. We've put them where we believe our team partners have the real strengths. We also have Agriculture Victoria as a part of our hub structure. Agriculture Victoria brings a number of strengths. Their statewide network of drought knowledge and services, their regional smart farms, and of course, we'll be looking at them to be collaborating with the universities and the regional nodes around many of the key deliveries that will come from this hub. The theme right the way through has been about co-design and about co-governance. And so when we look at our co-governance mechanisms in the hub, we've got these 3 key groups: the Investor Oversight Committee, the Hub Operations Committee, which will really be the engine room of the hub activities, and an advisory committee, high-level representation, industry and science communities, helping to steer us appropriately. And we believe that this co-governance process is absolutely critical, and I'll say a little more about it later on. Co-design has been a feature of our hub from the concept, the planning, through to the current, and it will go through to the future. Our regional consultation, co-design priority setting, engaging with stakeholders, nodes, key regional organisations, the universities, Agriculture Victoria. Consultation, within those regional nodes and with the networks that they have and which they will bring together. And of course, as I said before, absolutely critical. We want this node to load learning processes so that a good idea that comes up in Gippsland that might be applicable in the Northeast, we're actually working on that and making it really effective in terms of that knowledge transfer. Talking about knowledge and knowledge brokering, absolutely a critical part. Obviously, knowledge brokering process, a conduit between the partners, and the regional, our regional communities, between the Victoria Hub and other national drought hubs, all the ones we're hearing from at this meeting, and of course between the Victoria Hub and other key stakeholders. We want to add value to what's already going on, and I think that's been a clear message from the federal department that this isn't business as usual. We want things to be better, so we want to complement that capacity. And in knowledge brokering, there are going to be these key functions around the priority setting, the final selection of activities, communication and extension, a conduit to the research expertise at the statewide level, and assist with the leveraging of funding, and obviously designing enhanced knowledge brokering processes in conjunction with all of the partners, particularly our regional node partners. Engagement with First Nations people, absolutely critical part of our hub. At the statewide level, we're working with Ben Gordon from the Federation of Victorian Traditional Owner Corporations, and he's already given us some great guidance. But we want this to be building on the sort of current relationships that our partners already have with Indigenous groups around the country, and already there's some projects going on. I've just given a very small example of them there. So we're going to be working extremely hard on this, and we've already had a couple of meetings with Ben post-announcement. Progress to date. What have we done? Well, we've had 4 whole hub team meetings, all of the universities, Agriculture Victoria, all of the regional nodes. We have multiple meetings putting the bid together. We're up to 12 updates now on what's happening. We're developing the terms of reference for our key committees, the planning for the meetings, position descriptions, of course, the Science to Practice Forum and our video, which I hope you enjoyed, and preliminary engagement. And I suppose the key thing that I'm saying here about co-governance is, even though we will be making appointments here at the University of Melbourne in relation to the director and some other positions, we're still going to put those position descriptions to the Investor Oversight Committee. So all of our partners have a say in these processes of appointment. What are we seeking to do in the first 6 months from the hub? We certainly want to be developing regional priorities from farmers and communities, helping us to set the agenda for Victoria. We want to look at what people have already done. We want to combine some of the critical success factors for drought response in each region to strengthen information and support services across Victoria. In so doing, we want to create this platform, this powerhouse that harnesses information and communication technologies, forecasting and information services into a statewide drought forecasting and response powerhouse. When drought is imminent, when drought is happening, where should you turn to? We want people in Victoria to be turning to the Victoria Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub. And so that's part of what we want to really be establishing in this first part. The other thing that relates to not the business as usual, we want what we're calling some arrowhead projects, some major projects around industries. You know, what's the main thing that we're going to do about drought resilience with the dairy industry? What's the main thing we're going to do about drought resilience in the southwest region of Victoria? We want to tackle some of the big issues that haven't been really tackled comprehensively before, around rural and mental health challenges during drought. We've got our rural health people from the University of Melbourne. We've got deacons rural health unit and involved in thinking about how we might do this. We want to look at trying to break that nexus between the impacts of drought on farm and the associated devastating economic impacts on regional businesses and communities. How can we do that? How can we diversify in ways that we can make those impacts not flow on so much into regional communities? We think this is absolutely critical. And we think we've got the team that can tackle these big issues. I talked about the team. Our real belief is that we're going to get some real synergies, that the whole is going to be greater than the sum of the parts. Each one of our members brings something strong to the table, but working together, we think we can get some real synergies going. Our aim is to leave a legacy of drought resilience impacts on farms, for the environment, and for regional communities. And we're really looking forward to working with all of you in the federal department and all of you in the other hubs around the country to help achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. And it's question time now, and the questions have already started coming in. Obviously, people who've seen the other hubs are seeing how they're similar and they're different, obviously reflecting where they're coming from. And Victoria, a place, again, declaration of interest, very much dear to my heart. First question we've got in is from David Comben. And David asked you, Tim, you spoke about adding value. How and where do you feel the Victorian Hub is most able to add value to both your state and also the sub areas of the state? And I'd add, I think it's fair to say that most people have got a pretty good idea of where those subdivisions within the state of Victoria are, like the Wimmera Mallee and things like that. So where does the value adding come?
We think the value adding is going to come very much from the partnership. Obviously, you know, as I said, each one of the partners in the hub has been doing some very good work in the past and drought. And there's some excellent examples of that. And obviously, the services provided by Agriculture Victoria will be one of those. But we believe that by having this unique team sharing thoughts about how to tackle drought, how to build resilience, is really going to add value to some of the things that obviously will need to go on in relation to it. We're not trying to replace key things that go on. What we're trying to do is add on top of that some real strategies so that we're preparing for drought before we get into drought. Looking at the adding value will be breaking that nexus, for example, between impacts on farm and impacts in communities. So we think it's going to come from this sharing of knowledge, experience, and ideas, and being able to deliver them through our tried and trusted node leaders.
Another question here, which sort of talks to the sort of clear regional aspects of Victoria, from Jenny Evans. How do you feel the distinct regionalisation of Victoria will shape your hub? And if I can throw my 2 cents worth in, you know, people are always looking to what's going on next door, and that can create a nice creative tension, I guess, and sharing.
Yeah, look, we're not really looking at it in that way at all. What it's like everything else, you know, that they're basically 5 regional nodes. And to identify them, we've said, well, look, obviously the bird-chip cropping groups in northwest Victoria, that's your normal area of operation for southern farming systems. Most of their operations is in the southwest. Food and Fibre Gippsland, their operations are in Gippsland, and Riverine Plains in the northeast. And obviously the Mallee Regional Innovation Centre up in that northwest irrigated area. But we haven't got any hard lines drawn there. We want people to be able to go where they normally would turn to in terms of getting advice. And so we want it to be a natural fit. There's no hard lines, oh, you're in there, you're in here. We'll be working together, node to node, and with the statewide partners for a continuous flow of information where it's appropriate. Obviously, there will be activities and projects that are more applicable in the broadacre cropping in the northwest than they are to, and likewise, say, horticulture in Gippsland. But it certainly won't be a compartmentalised approach. We're acting as one. As I've said, we've already had the whole team meetings, all 10 organisations, 20 people there, sharing ideas. So, we've already got a seamless operation, I think.
Do you think, just as a sort of sidebar, do you think the kind of way we now meet because of COVID in this virtual space is actually aiding those conversations? People don't have to travel. They can see each other. They can see the body language, that kind of thing. Is that actually helping with deleting those sometimes arbitrarily written and drawn lines?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. First of all, it was sort of making the best of a bad job. As you know. We've been living with COVID in Victoria for a bit, but what it's enabled to do is to engage with a whole range of partners that, if we'd been doing the traditional way and driving around, etc., just wouldn't have happened. But as I said, we've been able to get all of those smiling faces around the table many, many times in co-designing the bid itself, and now, of course, in the co-design process for priority setting and the co-governance. And we've got our first meeting of the Investor Oversight Committee coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And that will be, the senior representative from each of the group that has investment. And, of course, that will include Michelle Ackroyd from the Federal Department. We think that's an absolutely critical part of our co-governance mode of operation.
Yeah, Michelle, who we heard from on day one of the forum. Kirsty Lee's asking this. She says, Kate from NRM Australia mentioned the importance of the catchment management groups in this space. How does the hub, your hub, hope to consult and work with the CMAs? Yes,
the CMAs are going to be key organisations in the regional consultation process. We've already had some significant dialogue with the CMAs at the state level. And, of course, one of the advantages of having our node leaders, as I say, tried and trusted organisations in their location, many of them already have key partnerships with the CMAs. Many Agriculture Victoria does. The universities each have their own relationships with CMAs. We see CMAs as absolutely critical in this regional consultation process, helping us to set priorities, helping us to deliver them, but also other groups out there, absolutely critical as well, whether they be water groups, whether they be land care groups, whether they be local government, other industry groups. We will be consulting with all of those. It's, we've got node leaders, but it's not just their current customers. They're leading because they know their way around that part of the world. And, as I say, quite often already have great relationships with local CMAs.
A lot of experience obviously being brought to the table. How much representation is there of the younger end of the community, be it farming community or regional rural communities? Are you getting engagement from those kind of people?
Absolutely, that'll be critical. I think I can safely say I'm the oldest bloke in this hub setup, and
come, Tim.
I'm just the interim director. But again, one of the things about for universities, obviously, universities have got all their alumni out there. largely, of course, young people by definition. The farming groups out there are, working with all those communities and all the farmers, old and young. So, we believe that by having, as I know I keep repeating this, but by having those tried and trusted node people out there, they know their way around this. They're working with the younger farmers, they're working with schools, they're working with other organisations in their communities. So to then have them working in relation to the Drought Hub, in relation to that, will be something that should come naturally, but of course it will be armed with different knowledge and skills coming from the whole of the hub.
I just had a bit of a light bulb moment there. You mentioned the word schools, and I think that's the first time we've actually heard that word. And of course, it has to be part of it. Talking of old dogs, new tricks kind of thing, John Kennedy asks, what common features do you find with your communities and stakeholders who demonstrate resilience? And have you got a sort of plan in mind of how to learn from them and then go forward and share those kind of lessons?
Yeah, a very good question. Thanks, John. Yes. When I was talking about the first 6 months, anyone can recall that slide. The second thing that we want to do is to look at what the really good things that have happened in the past, what lessons can we learn, bringing them together and making sure that we're building on those and not reinventing the wheel. So we really want to share amongst these things. So there could be something that really worked well in Gippsland. We want to make sure that at least the principles of that we're sharing right across the hub. And I think you would have picked up from the video that there's a lot of excitement here about this unique team working together for the first time, and it's on drought. And that's because of the great initiative of the Future Drought Fund. And I'm pleased to see one of our regional node leaders and the interim deputy director of the hub, Fiona Best, just put up a little statement there about getting to those next generation people will be absolutely critical.
And finally, Tim, and if I may, on a personal note, you've already said you've been around the block a few times. Looking forward, how different is this conversation about drought and planning and getting things in place? How much has it changed from what were tried, tested, and often not so successful in the past? Is this a sea change, what the things we're now talking about and the way we're arranging how we talk about these things?
Well, that again is a very good question, and we're certainly thinking of it as a sea change. When I look back, over my 50 odd years of working in agriculture and working with farmers, a lot of it up here in northeast Victoria, out of Rutherglen, most of the things we did in drought before were about what happened during drought. Drought feeding, looking after livestock, those sorts of things. The future in the Drought Fund, I think, is absolutely critical. That we're now trying to work on drought, not in drought. We're thinking about what can build resilience. I was talking about, breaking that nexus between what happens on the farm, what happens in communities. What's the diversification that we can bring now so that the community or the farms have got another source of income that is not connected to how much rain falls out of the sky or how much access you have to water. And there are some pretty exciting things there. We talked a lot about sort of technologies in this forum, but I really see it as more a sort of three-layered approach. Obviously, we've got to be looking at the industries and their drought resilience. So the choice of industry is obviously important in a region and with our changing climate. The second thing is that within the industry, we've got to look at the production systems that are the most drought resilient. They're still productive and profitable, but they're more resilient to climate shocks, particularly drought. So that's the second layer. And then the third layer is, what is the role of new technologies, of new digital technologies, of monitoring, of delivery, of micro irrigation, etc. So we're really looking at it in that integrated approach of making the right choices about land use, making the right choices around farming system, and then what's the role of new technology in there.
Professor Tim Reeves, you may have seen the comment, but I'm going to reiterate it, about your passion and what enthusiasm you brought to the table, as have all the hubs. Thank you so much for joining us from Victoria today, and have a great rest of the day. 7 hubs down. You're welcome. 7 hubs down. Oh, there's an audience. Fantastic. Some people are in the room. Others, unfortunately, we've had to make other arrangements right at the last minute. And one of those cases was actually South Australia. Last but by no means least in our hub lineup. We'll be crossing live to SA shortly. But before that, let's take a look at this.
Welcome to South Australia's Drought Resilience, Adoption and Innovation Hub, based here at Roseworthy in South Australia's mid-north, the home of Australia's first agricultural college. I'm Chris Preston, the Interim Director of the South Australian Drought Hub. This hub's going to play a crucial role in preparing South Australia for future droughts. Led by the University of Adelaide, the South Australian Drought Hub consists of 59 dynamic partners, including grower groups, the 3 South Australian universities, government agencies, research, development and extension partners, agribusiness, Indigenous partners and various industry bodies. We are fortunate to have so many committed partners across the breadth of the state, willing and able to contribute to the South Australian Drought Hub. These partners are going to be contributing $11.5 million of cash and in-kind, in addition to the $8 million from the federal government's Future Drought Fund. Our hub model consists of the core hub here at Roseworthy and 5 regional nodes: at Minneba on the Eyre Peninsula, at Port Augusta in the far north, at Orroroo in the upper north, at Loxton in the Riverland and at Struan in the southeast. The location of these nodes ensures that we've got statewide coverage across all pastoral, low, medium and high rainfall agricultural production zones in South Australia. This initiative will generate employment in the regions, it will build stronger farm businesses, strengthen business knowledge and build resilience in primary production businesses in South Australia.
Like everyone else, I'm really excited about this initiative. It brings together a network of our primary producers, industry groups, researchers, government agencies, agribusinesses, traditional owners and other stakeholder groups to work together towards a common vision to strengthen the drought resilience and preparedness of our farms and regional communities in South Australia. The South Australian Drought Hub links with all industry sectors, from cropping and livestock to viticulture and horticulture. So much fantastic research and development has already been done to develop strategies to increase drought resilience and preparedness, as well as innovations that have been developed by our leading primary producers during past droughts. Now it's time to build on that hard work and increase adoption and scaling out of these innovations throughout South Australia. Our hub's regional nodes and their various activities will be co-designed and driven from the ground up. With input from partners at our local level, each node will establish drought-resilient priorities. To address these priorities, extension programs will be designed to facilitate adoption of drought-resilient practices in our farming systems through peer-to-peer learning, on-farm demonstrations and training workshops. It's very much a holistic approach. We can't prevent droughts, but we can bring together the people, the information and resources into the hub network that will facilitate the strategies to enable our farms and regional communities to be better prepared for future droughts.
The first step will involve understanding what's happened in the past through benchmarking existing research knowledge, resources and practices. What has worked and where, and what are the gaps in adoption and research to build resilience. We'll develop new initiatives to extend this existing knowledge into areas where adoption has been limited, validating practices and building skills and knowledge. We'll develop a portfolio of good ideas from farmers and their key influences that informs future research. The key to the success of the Drought Hub will be the ability to connect directly with farmers so that their ideas are developed and they are then able to build their skills and knowledge to implement new and innovative practices. Through our partners in South Australia, farmers will work with the researchers from the very beginning to ensure activities are relevant to their specific needs. The South Australian Drought Hub aims to empower farmers with the ability to make informed decisions, enabling them to better understand drought for their benefit and that of their families, communities and industries. Thanks to the commitment and enthusiasm of so many partners, we're ready to embark on the journey to meet the challenges ahead.
So, time for our final hub, and any final hub questions specifically for SA, but also if there are more broad-ranging questions which can be answered by a hub that's been watching closely everything else that's been happening around the country. Anyway, without much further ado, keep the questions coming in, and running the show from SA, it's over to Chris Preston. Hello, Chris, how are you?
I'm well, and good afternoon, and thank you everybody for watching our video. So my name's Chris Preston and I'm going to be presenting this afternoon on behalf of the team at the South Australian Drought Hub. And I'm not actually where I was expecting to present today, but I have done a bit of redecorating. So my lounge room sits in Kaurna country, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people of the area around Adelaide, who are just traditional custodians of the land, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And now I'd like to spend a bit of time telling you a little bit more about South Australia and our state's Drought Hub. So food, wine and agribusiness is the largest export and manufacturing sector in South Australia, and it is one of the key pillars of the South Australian economy. It is a resilient sector and it's characterised by a history of innovation, the adoption of new technologies and efficiency and productivity gains. Total primary production for 2019-2020 was 14.1 billion. This was despite a really challenging year in 2019-20, where we had drought and bushfires impacting production, and then the COVID-19 pandemic creating major disruptions in the second half of the year. In South Australia, we have some challenges because South Australia is the driest state in the driest inhabited continent. Rainfall has high importance. When I lived in the United States, one of the things I noticed that was as you enter towns in New England, that they would announce on a sign at the front of the beginning of the town, the date of founding of that town. And in Colorado, the towns would advertise their height above sea level. In South Australia, there's a tendency for towns to announce what their annual rainfall is. Most of the agricultural enterprises in South Australia occur on land that receives less than 600 millimetres of rainfall per year, on average. However, the upside of that is that many of our primary producers have developed a lot of skill and expertise in managing in dry conditions. This provides us with a significant opportunity that we hope to capitalise on through peer-to-peer learning across our regions. On the other side of the coin, Having low rainfall means that if there's any reduction in rainfall at critical times of the year, that can have a major impact on profitability of farm businesses. And significant parts of South Australia have suffered through drought in recent years. In 2019, the positive Indian Ocean dipole situation that we had led to 70% of the state being affected by drought. And this included many of the major production areas, including the Eyre Peninsula, the Upper North, the Northern Yorke Peninsula, the Murray-Mallee, the Mid-North and the North East, and the pastoral zones. And large areas of South Australia pastoral districts received less than 30 millimetres of rainfall. When drought hits, there's a ripple effect that impacts individual farmers, their families, and regional communities. Mixed farming in South Australia is reliant on winter rainfall and temperate growing conditions, and it's highly sensitive to climate and seasonal variability. Anomalies in rainfall and mean temperature in the growing season are causing volatile, short-term declines in productivity. This may only get worse. The State of the Climate 2020 report indicates that Southern Australia will continue to see an increase in average temperatures in all seasons, more hot days and warm spells, and less rainfall during the cool seasons. A dry, warming trend will lead to a southward shift in South Australian rainfall zones. And a recent report based on CSIRO's Climate Change in Australia and the CSIRO Goyder Institute projections indicates that by 2050, rainfall will decline in South Australia for all regions. So it's essential that South Australian mixed farming businesses are equipped with and adopt existing knowledge, technologies, tools, practices and systems to deal with the variable and changing climate in the short term. There's a need for stakeholders to co-design activities to achieve transformational change and develop best practice economic, environmental and social practices to manage increasing climate variability. So our hub rationale. It's a cross-commodity hub linking with all sectors for broad resilience and innovation across South Australia. It's aligned to the strategic plans and industry blueprints of the grain sector and the livestock sector. It's got linkages to the proposed One Basin CRC, which will have a lower basin hub, and they will be spending a lot of their time on irrigated agriculture. We'll also have linkages to the Green Triangle Forestry Industry Hub. And one of the features of our hub is that we'll be building our activities based on rainfall zones, where the challenges are similar and producers can learn from similar experiences that other producers have had. The model we have is that we'll have a core hub at Roseworthy in the mid-north of South Australia, and then we're going to have 5 nodes. And this map depicts the coverage of those nodes. So there'll be a node at Minnipa on the Eyre Peninsula. There'll be a node at Port Augusta, which will be focused on the pastoral zone. There'll be a node at Orroroo in the upper north. There'll be a node at Loxton, which will be covering the Murray lands and the Riverland. And there'll be a node at Struan, which will cover the southeast, Kangaroo Island, the Limestone Coast, the Adelaide Hills, the Fleurieu Peninsula, and the southern Eyre Peninsula. As I said earlier, the location of these nodes means that we've got statewide coverage of all pastoral, low, medium, and high rainfall agricultural production zones. Each of the nodes will have a coordinator, and each node will also have a stakeholder advisory group that will be made up of the partners that are involved in that node. We have 59 partners, and I will not list them all, but really importantly, a alongside the University of Adelaide, we have SARDI and PIRSA, but also the other universities in South Australia. But most importantly, we've got a large range of grower groups in our as partners in our hub. We also have Indigenous partners. We've got agribusinesses. We've got research, development and extension partners, and we've got industry organisations. And this diagram is how we see our hub working. We have the hub in the middle, and then the activities are focused around the nodes, with the various groups that are located feeding in to each one of those nodes. As Mark mentioned in the video, through the hub, partners, our farmers will be working with researchers from the outset. So one of the things we really want to do is to make sure that the activities that are being done have researchers tied into those on-ground activities, ensuring that we meet the needs of our partners around drought preparedness and resilience. So what are our plans? Well, we'll do some benchmarking. We need to set some priorities, which we'll be doing through our nodes. We'll be developing our co-design programs, and we'll be looking at validation of innovations. Some of the themes that have emerged from our consultations to date are grower decision-making and on-farm resilience strategies, livestock production and fodder management, agronomic management of crops, particularly cereals and pulses, and of pastures, soil productivity and management, and on-farm water management. And I'm expecting that these will feature strongly in the activities that our hub conducts. We'll be delivering training and workshops. We'll be trying to influence practice change, and ultimately what we want to achieve is to build resilience within the agricultural community of South Australia. So I'd like to thank you for your time in listening to our presentation, and I hope that there's been some interest in some of the things that we're going to be getting up to.
Thanks, Chris. So we've got some questions that have come in already. Keep those questions coming in the Q&A box. Right, let's start at the top here. A question from the ACT from Tony Kennedy. He's asking a direct question, actually. Are South Australian farmers still burning off stubble after harvest? He says he can remember learning this practice when at the Agricultural College there at Roseworthy.
Well, the vast majority of farmers in South Australia have now adopted no-till and stubble retention. So they're trying to maintain all the stubble they can, because they've understood that this is actually vital for soil health, it's vital for nutrient cycling, and more importantly, it's vital for productivity. There are still some areas where we have some issues around managing stubble, and this really falls particularly in the high rainfall zones that we have, where crops could be so large that you cannot seed your next crop in through the stubble. And there, farmers have to get rid of the stubble one way or another. A number of them cut low and remove that stubble from the farm and sell it as straw. But under certain circumstances, and particularly when we have difficult years, burning that stubble becomes the only practical option.
Another question here that's come in, how can you get people directly involved in, and it's one of the phrases of our meeting over the last few days, the co-design process. How have you got a particular way of trying to get as many people and as diverse a group of people involved with that?
So, my thinking about how we're going to go ahead and do that is that we want to go out. So we have the node structures, and we're going to go out, we're going to spend some time, and we're going to spend time listening to the people at the nodes about what they see their issues are. And then we need to be also listening to what they think the solutions might look like. And within that, of course, it'll be their ideas and their ideas about solutions that will end up going forward with. So they'll actually have some ownership over this. And once people have ownership over the process, they are much more likely to take on the outcomes. Once we've done that, of course, we want to get some experts involved in that process so that we make sure that the activities that are delivered are robust and that we measure the right things, because measurements are a key part of understanding whether change has been effective.
Got a question here from Mark Bateman for you, Chris. The State of the Climate report and the report from the CSIRO seem quite dire, says Mark. What do you think are the big barriers to these kind of messages to driving change? You know, that background noise, if you like. We're talking very often in the kind of discussions we've had here about quite specific things, but in the background all the time, State of the Climate report and what's coming from CSIRO.
I think that, certainly my experience with Australian primary producers is that they've largely got over the idea that they need to, be against climate change. Climate change has happened to us in South Australia already. So farmers understand that they need to know how the climate is going to move, and they need to make adjustments to their management strategies accordingly. So I don't know that we're going to have too much problem with the noise in the background so much. I think the issues that we're going to be really facing are how do we actually provide the strategies that farmers are going to need to be able to manage that into the future. So I think that the fact that this is actually already happening, we're already seeing some of the things that I spoke about in my presentation on the ground, means that most producers have got an understanding that this is happening and we need to adapt to it.
And now a deceptively simple question, I think, from Adam Zer, who asks, what are the, in inverted commas, right things to measure? How do you decide what to measure in coming to your conclusions and therefore informing policy priorities and the kind of activities you're going to get engaged with?
Well, the right things to measure are often going to depend upon the type of activity you're doing and what you're doing that activity for. So one of the things that can happen is you can get over measurement, is that people decide that they're going to measure everything they can about the process, whereas often you need to sit back a little bit and look at it and go, well, if this is the outcome we're looking for, how do we measure that outcome? So this is why we want to get the experts involved, because I'm an expert in my own little space and I know what needs to be measured in work that I get involved in, but I don't know what needs to be measured in other spaces. So we want to get those researchers embedded in this co-design process with the on-ground people so that we actually get the right things measured.
I mentioned to Tim in Victoria that in that state there was a fairly clear recognition of what the various regions of the state are and where they are, and they're fairly close together. Of course, in South Australia, you have distinct geographical areas, but they're far apart. How do you bring the nodes together just in a feeling of being we're all in this together as well as their specific tasks? Again, are platforms like this where we can talk online digitally and see each other, do you think that's going to aid the process? Because there's a lot of tyranny of distance in SA.
Look, I think that there's going to be a number of things that we're going to have to do around that space. And I think one of the things that will set us up well is the concept of trying to build our hub around the rainfall zones. And that means that we've got producers and groups who are battling similar problems. And so that they end up then talking within the node with people who've got similar issues and who have experience that they can relate to. So that's one of the things that I think we'll do well through that. The other one, of course, is that, yes, how do you deal with a big state like South Australia and getting around? And, in some ways there is no true substitute for getting out into people's own backyard and talking to them about the problems they've got. That's when you learn the most. So there will need to be a lot of that. But we also need to bring people together. And I think that now that we've all got used to doing these sorts of exercises. I think we can use these as that sort of regular in-between times of bringing people together to have discussions about what's happening on the ground, what's working, what's not working, and how do we, change what's not working and turn it into something that's working.
And going back to the particularities of the state, particularly I think the north, has the South Australian Hub, asked George Wilson, this question comes from, George asks, has the South Australian Hub been able to engage with the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation?
Look, we've had some engagement with some of the Indigenous bodies, and certainly, there's plenty of knowledge and expertise that they have, and I will be really, really interested in listening to what they're going to say, and trying to work with them about how do we meet their needs as well as meeting the needs of pastoralists in that area.
Amanda Robinson has asked, many of the hubs, do many of them share the same partners? And if they do, how will this affect the way you all connect? Because obviously you're keeping an eye on your nodes, but I'm guessing you're glancing from side to side and looking up, looking up at the sky, looking down at the ground and seeing what some of the others are up to.
Oh, look, we're in a particular position of that because one of our partners is actually also involved in the Victorian Hub. So one of the key things that we're going to want to do as we're starting that sort of co-design process is to continue to be in touch with other hubs that might be doing similar sort of things, because there's no point in duplicating things that don't need to be duplicated. But there might be things that, our groups are coming up and say, we want to look at this. And, they're saying the same thing in Victoria. So why don't we do it together instead of doing it in isolation? So we see Victoria in that space as being one. We're certainly interested in talking to Southern New South Wales and Victoria around irrigated cropping when we get involved in that, and of course in the pastoral zone we'll probably be looking to northern New South Wales, southeast Queensland hub for how do we make sure that what we're doing is adding value and we're not just doing the same thing up there as we're doing down here.
And Chris, one last question, and from me, and we've been together now for 3 days in this forum, and I feel we're all friends. If we weren't friends to begin with, we're certainly all friends now. Can I ask you, who's someone who's observed the landscape over quite a long period, can you just talk about your own personal feeling about where we are and where we hope to go?
Look, I think I'm going to perhaps talk a little bit about of history there, because as I got involved in agriculture some 30 years ago when I moved to South Australia, and what I can say about the landscape in South Australia is that while things have got drier, management of the land has got incredibly better. We had a devastating drought in 2019 within the state. And, back when I was young, a drought like that would lead to farmers not getting their seed back and the whole place blowing away. And while we did have some dust storms in some really badly affected areas who'd been in drought for a long time, the damage was a whole lot less. And what I'd like to see is for us to continue to move that stewardship of the land that our farmers have developed through new practices to the point where we actually don't get these issues when drought hits, that there is enough ground cover to hold the land. So I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping that we can get out of this whole Future Drought Fund process, is that we'll just actually be better stewards of the land.
Thanks so much, Chris Preston, and thank you in particular for being so flexible. I know it's been a bit of a rocky ride for all the hubs in where they're going to be and how they're going to deliver their presentations, but you have brought the hub presentations to a fantastic finale. Go well, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, we're getting now to sort of the business end, I guess, of what we've been doing for 3 days, and Alluvium Consulting, they really want to capture comments and hear from you people out there about what we've been talking about. So we put a poll up now, so you can tell us how you plan to use the Drought Resilience Research and Adoption Investment Plan. Polls sometimes are a bit of fun. This is deadly serious. This is direct input into where we go next. And where we go next in the forum is to Alluvium and is to Katie. Hello there, Katie. And I believe people should have devices and laptops at the ready because we're going to get a bit interactive in the next hour or so. Over to you.
That's right, thank you. We should also have Bill and Tim from Alluvium joining us, but while we wait for that to happen, I'll introduce myself, Katie McRobert. I'm the General Manager of the Australian Farm Institute, and we've been working with Alluvium on this investment plan. Now that we've got Bill and Tim, I'll pass over to Bill to do the formal introduction.
Thank you, Katie. And thanks, everybody, for joining us once again. So today, I suppose we wanted to build a bit on our session from 2 days ago. So, we've put the poll out there. Thank you for everybody who's contributed to that. That's really given us a sense of, I suppose, what are the major themes, that we've already identified that are going to be really important here. So today, I suppose it's about sharing with you some of our thinking about those focus areas, because we've done a whole lot of work in the background. Tuesday was really the big picture and the engagement, and this is getting into the nitty-gritty a bit more. We also want to get some feedback from you guys on some of these real priority focus areas, just to help us focus the investment plan a little bit more. So we've got a few of us are going to speak about different parts of the investment plan today, and I think, Tim, it's over to you now.
Thanks very much, Bill. Hi everyone, I'm Tim Fisher from Alluvium, and it's great to be here today. And as you can see, these are the priority directions that were covered in the poll, and as you'll see in the poll results, this priority direction of securing the natural resource base was most prominent in Tuesday's poll outcomes. So if I can, yes, thanks, Katie. In summary, I guess you could say that the state of knowledge on the relationship between drought and natural resource condition is not as good as it could be. And there's a raft of reasons for that. There's a raft of dimensions of that too. As a research and adoption priority, the challenge is to build the data, knowledge and tools needed to better understand the role and significance of NRM for drought resilience in agriculture. Next slide, please, Katie. Now, here's a quick refresher. These are the 4 focus areas that we've identified under this priority direction of securing the natural resource base. The capacity and limits of farming landscapes, which you ranked at number 5 in Tuesday's poll. Evaluating the resilience of systems and practices came in at number 1. Building knowledge about natural capital and ecosystem services, ranked at 4. And the drought resilience opportunities and benefits associated with carbon sequestration, number 8. So that if we could go to the next slide, please, Katie. What we have for you here is a question. We'd like to harvest some more insights from you in answer to this question about the adoption challenges associated with this NRM priority direction. So, thinking about the communication and adoption challenges of this priority, what's the best scale to consider? And who would be the best partners to involve? I'd ask you now to make use of the next 2 to 3 minutes or so to provide your answers to this question using the link on this slide. So we'll just pause there while you think about your answers and record them in Slido.
I'll also just post that link there into the comment box. Might make it easier for people. But yep, if you can jump in there, you can put in more than one answer if you've got more than one thought. But we'll give you a few moments to just consider that. If you've got your phone nearby, put on a little bit of thinking music. Keep yourselves busy. We should also say a very big thank you to everybody who's contributed to the poll. We were hoping to get, some good responses from everybody. We weren't expecting to get 200 responses. So well done, everybody, for making sure that you've contributed and made sure that you've got your voice heard so far. We're looking forward to hearing what comes next. Since the question is already on Slido, I'll just go back a couple of slides there. What you guys identified as a very strong priority so far is securing the natural resource base, and the things that you identified as focus areas, which is actually all 4 of the ones that we had listed there, were landscape capacity and limits, evaluating resilience systems and practices, natural capital and ecosystem services, and carbon sequestration. I'll leave that slide up there just to give you a bit of context as well, so people can see how things are going. I'll move that across and we can see that we've got quite a few answers coming in already.
Nice to see somebody doing it at the paddock scale. It's a bit of an outlier.
Bit of an outlier.
Yep.
It's a fairly strong leaning towards regional scale.
Farm sub-paddock scale. That's
There's
good.
a few farms coming in at the end.
Mm-hmm. And lots of both. Just to make our job easy.
If we could have a few extra comments on the best partners to involve as well, that would be very helpful. Thanks, Grace. We're on the same page. Good point, Lee. Pop that into the Slido capture as well. You do need to work initially at paddock scale to get to farm scale, and then at farm scale to get to regional scale.
All right, well, should we get started with the next focus area? So what the next focus area that you guys identified, and it came through quite strongly, but it stood out a little bit from the other ones because it was about water and water use efficiency. Now, this means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on what your role is in the community, what type of business you've got, where you are in the value chain. But the way that we've sort of thought about it in the investment plan, and the way that is it fits in with this priority direction of of transformational change. So we've been thinking about that water efficiency probably at a higher scale, and thinking about it in terms of what are the hydrological systems, what are the business systems that link to these resilient natural systems that Tim's been talking about just now. So it's really about what is the business model, how does water fit in with that, and how does that support this longer term resilience is sort of how we've imagined it here. But having said that, we've heard a lot of different thoughts about water efficiency through our different engagement workshops, from everything from capturing rainfall in soils with increased carbon, through to better irrigation efficiency, through to capture and storage of water on farm. So it's a bit of a catch-all term. But really what we've got is it's about the information that people need to be able to plan their water use over this wet and dry cycle, and how people communicate through the value chain. From it can be everything from people operating water supply systems through to the users, and through to suppliers and buyers planning their businesses around that. So really, I suppose the question that we've got for you today is really to talk to us about what it means for you in your region. So what are the measures that are most relevant to you in your hub? We think there'll be some of the hubs will probably have very similar thoughts about what water use efficiency means and at what scale you should be thinking about it. Whereas others will come out quite differently depending on geography and climate. So that's your question. It's to really think about you in your hub and tell us what water efficiency and water security means for you.
Yes, and just to add to that, just to emphasise, this is through a drought resilience lens. Looking at this question through the perspective of building drought resilience.
Interesting comment there from Matt about Gary's comments yesterday, which unfortunately I missed, but priority 3 is all about rehydrating the landscape.
That is an interesting one, and I think it goes beyond just the agricultural landscapes as well. If you think about our water producing catchments, managing fire and forestry, and maximising runoff and storage within the forests can really have big impacts further downstream.
We do have a lot more to ask of you today, so although we still have answers coming in, we're going to be brutal. Move on to the next section. I'll push Bill onto the next section. I'll leave the poll open a little bit longer if people are still thinking you want to add some thoughts, but we'll move on to the next bit there, Bill. Skipping backwards.
Thanks, Katie. So the next priority area has got a bit of a different focus in terms of who a research user is. This one's more about, I think, primary producers. So I think the focus areas that were identified were around risk management and preparedness for drought. So to me, this really links back quite closely to when we looked at the survey there and the results coming from primary producers in that survey, rating risk management as being probably the top priority in terms of adoption of existing knowledge. So this one's coming down from the landscape scale and really focusing more on the business and the farm scale. And one of the things that we heard out of the workshops was really about incorporating this into a business model. So it's about what does that resilient landscape look like at the farm, and how do you make money out of that? What's the information that you need? So what are the tools? But also it's about having the skills to be able to use that information in a timely and robust way to manage risk. So, really we see the key stakeholders here being, the primary producers, advisors, extension officers, people with risk management skills there. So this one's really I see this as being an adoption problem more than anything else. It's about getting the existing knowledge out there to people, and also learning from people who are doing it better. The people on the ground are the ones who have to manage the risks, and there's probably a lot we can learn from people who are doing it well that will help inform the research. So what was our question? I think it was around adoption. Okay, yeah, here we go. Yeah, this one's really focusing on the adoption.
So closing off the water poll, sorry for those who are still typing. That's over, and moving on in Slido to what are the key adoption barriers to uptake of risk management tools and options as they relate to drought resilience.
It's worth mentioning we've had some interesting discussion about, both in the workshops and later on, about getting the right advice and getting it from trusted sources. So making sure that the people giving advice have got qualifications and have got the right background to be able to do that. And I think Michelle and the team at the Future Drought Fund are looking into that a bit more as well.
A comment just on the screen at the moment sums up very clearly what we've heard over the past few months, that trusted, independent and regionally based advisors are absolutely crucial.
Yep. Skilled and engaging trainers as well.
And it's gone down because this is a popular one. Everyone's typing so fast, but I just saw something in there about timing of when the advice and the adoption is being rolled out is absolutely crucial as well, which is another theme that we heard in our workshops up to this date. Okay, moving on to the next lot of priorities that you as a group have helped us identify as being the most urgent priorities out of that list of 21 we provided on Tuesday. Something else that did come out was the importance of resilient communities, which of course we've identified through the workshop process. We know all of these things are important, but this has come up into your top 10 as well. The impacts of drought, of course, stretch beyond farm businesses and families. Ag is the cornerstone of prosperity for many rural, regional, remote and Indigenous communities, which leads to very clear negative effects on those communities during drought. Social and behavioural research can enable understanding about the perceptions and capacities within those communities to adapt to drought and to build resilience. Pardon me, don't have COVID, promise. Even if I do, you can't catch it from me. Research in this theme will explore how people perceive and respond to risk and understand what those barriers are to people in those communities engaging in increased preparedness for drought, and to understand the impacts of economic hardship and maladaptation on people and communities. Much of the research development and extension and adoption activities which were gathered up in the ACIL Allen stocktake, which was undertaken last year, they've demonstrated a focus on the imperative of economic resilience outcomes, but sustained triple bottom line resilience will only be achieved if there's an increasing understanding of the building of social resilience. And that's certainly something that came out a lot in our workshops, that people told us that social resilience is very important, but that there's not a very good understanding of how those things are rated or ranked, or what the baseline is, or how you measure social resilience. So community and social resilience questions, they relate to the themes of production systems and technology and financial instruments, income. Then the hubs and the multidisciplinary innovation proposals will be really important in including these elements which explore social resilience. So just got to multitask and skip over here to forward my slide. There we go. The priorities that you guys identified for us in the survey, social and community resilience came in ranked at number 6. Stakeholders have identified that the social barriers to drought resilience in adoption and investment are pretty poorly understood as they stand so far. The behaviours and influences on individuals, communities, businesses and enterprises and markets in response to drought and the imperative to increase resilience need to be much better understood than they currently are. And this knowledge can then be used to design services and appropriately extend the options and to meaningfully engage instead of it just being lip service. Behaviours for preparedness also sort of squeezed in there at number 9 out of your top 10, with people identifying that understanding resistance to resilience is a barrier within itself, which is a little bit meta, I know, but there's a really strong need to identify what the triggers and indicators are for drought resilience planning, which decisions have the biggest effect on resilience outcomes, and understand how to improve on-the-ground decision-making during, of course, what are very slow and stressful events. Droughts don't come on us suddenly. There's a lot of time building up to what can be very traumatic for people. So the question that we'd like to ask you next in Slido is, when you're thinking about the barriers to improving community resilience, who are the partners that can facilitate this? And we're talking about organisations and individuals. So this is a fairly specific question. feel free to put in some other general thoughts as well, as if you like, but specifically we're asking you this time, who are those partners and where can they make the biggest impact? So again, giving you some thinking time, minus thinking music, 2 or 3 minutes. Let me switch back over to the poll and open the next one, just a second. Right, that should be open for you now. Banks is your very first answer. That's a surprise to me. So there you go. I was going to say, why are you so quiet on social when you're so busy on the last one? Yeah, interesting.
Katie, we had somebody ask a question that kind of preempted this. They put a question in to the website last night about involving community groups. So, you know, Rotary, CWA type groups, and identifying people outside of the agricultural sector as being key partners for the hubs.
Now, we've asked you some fairly specific questions about the priorities and the focus areas that have been identified in your top 10 so far. We wanted to do something a little bit different now. Still interactive. We're having a lot of fun with Slido, so we thought we'd use it to its best advantage and ask you to consider what the 3 things you think are the most important for the Drought Resilience Research and Adoption Investment Plan to consider. Now, when we ask you to do this in Slido, I haven't changed it over yet, so if you're still having your last minute thoughts on social resilience, you can pop those in. But when I switch it over, we're asking you to try and stick to a single word if you can, or a short phrase, so that we can see if you've used word clouds before, you'll know that if a lot of people say one particular thing, that word will get bigger and we can see where the visually where people's priorities lie. So if possible, check your spelling before you hit enter and try and keep it to a single word or a short phrase. All right, apologies to those people who are still going on social resilience, but your time is up. I'm going to open the word cloud and ask you to pop your thoughts in there. Bill and Tim, is there anything jumping out at you that you didn't expect to see, or anything surprising there? There's a lot of confirmation of things we have heard, of course, which we would expect. There are a few things that are popping out for me as being interesting emphases.
I saw somebody wrote hydrogen and oxygen, and I'm guessing that means water. It's interesting to see trust there.
It is.
Which came through in some of our earlier sessions about trusted sources of knowledge and advice.
Yeah, there seems to be a focus on the physical and the biophysical and the systems there. You know, we're seeing the people and the communities come in there, but you know, the big focus on the physical reality of it.
And soil health is coming through, and everything that soil health means is obviously coming through as the biggest theme at the moment in building drought resilience.
Well, noting, of course, that this is not in any way scientific, and we're not going to be using this word cloud to direct your hard-earned dollars in particular. It's just more interesting for us to sort of gauge a sense of where people's instinctive priorities lie. All right, we do have a few extra questions to ask.
The sort of questions that will be asked of the plan as well, I think.
Indeed.
I mean, it's a good indicator to us of what people will be looking for when they pick this up and what we need to cover.
And on that note, as much as it's fun to watch a word cloud evolve like that, we do have a few extra things that we wanted to ask you as well. So we've got some open questions to go through, but we do also have some time put aside at the end of our session here to allow you to re-rank those priorities that we discussed earlier, having had some time to think about it with these other questions that we've asked you along the way. So looking at the time, where are we up to? 40 minutes. So we've got 20 minutes left in our hour. So we might see if we can get through a few of these open questions just quite quickly, and then we'll give you some time at the end to have some more thought on how we would re-rank those top 10 and which order you'd put them in. So I might just go straight to the Slido. What do you think, Belle and Tim?
Yeah, I think so.
To figure out which tab I've got open. It's this one here. Okay. So, first question we're going to ask you, what are the best cross-sectoral opportunities to improve drought resilience? This is your speed dating section of the questions. So you've got 1 minute to get through this one, starting from now. There are no cross-sectoral opportunities to improve drought resilience. Thanks for your time.
Takes a while to type, Katie.
I shouldn't say 1 minute then, that's a bit unfair. We'll say you've got 2 minutes. Please explain. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit more about the cross-sectoral opportunities? Throwing you under the bus because this was your question.
Yep. So really, I suppose this is about the... there's a lot of things it could mean, but there's cross-sectoral in terms of the type of research that's being done. So, environmental research, plant breeding, soils and systems. So thinking about the type of research and extension that's being done there and trying to bring those together. So, for example, a plant breeding thing is focused on one small part of the system, but then there's another thing that's focused on soils. Obviously, those two things relate to each other, so that might be a chance for researchers and extension services to sort of bundle up their effort. Then there's, of course, cross-sectoral in terms of the agricultural value chain, so from suppliers, producers, finances, and getting the information to people through that sort of network.
I'd just add there, looking across the different commodity sectors to some of the more common themes shared across, whether in grazing, cropping, various types of horticulture and so forth. Those cross-sectoral opportunities from that perspective as well.
Yeah, the different industries and commodities, on a farm or within a region.
And the different RDCs as well as investors.
All right.
And I suppose that points to one of the things that the investment plan is supposed to do, is that it's supposed to identify these opportunities for people in the existing research system to come together. So it's not just about what the Future Drought Fund is going to do, but it's about identifying priorities as identified by users and people on the ground to help make that whole, $1 billion research and investment sector bit better focused on drought.
Okay, so we might move on to the next open question, which is hopefully a little bit more self-explanatory, which is, what are the resilience measures that no one else is yet doing? I'm assuming that doesn't mean mouse population control either. There's some interesting points coming through there, so I'm hesitant to cut it off too soon. But while you're still popping your answers into that particular question, we do have a related question, very strongly related question for you coming up next, which is what existing research you're aware of where adoption and extension is lagging. So I'll give you, people are still typing busily away in Slido, I'll give you another short moment just to finish that up, and then I'll open question 3. The particular reason we're asking this question too is that it was a very strong theme throughout the workshops expressed by people that there is plenty of research out there that's not been adopted and taken up, but we didn't get a lot of specific feedback on what particular research people were talking about, like where the actual blockages were. So you can be as specific as you like. If you wanted to talk about a particular project or a particular initiative that you're aware of or involved with, or you have a particular dog in this race, that's actually fine. Horse in this race, isn't it? Dog in the fight, horse in the race. Feel free to pop that in there as well. While you're thinking about where adoption and extension is lagging, in the back of your mind, we also want you to be thinking about what kind of activities would help to address that problem. And watching the time, I'm aware that we've only got an hour with you, and there's a little less than 10 minutes left of that. So as you're popping those last couple of notes in on the existing research where adoption and extension is lagging, we might move on to the next one, which is what are your top 3 adoption activity priorities? How do we address question 3? So moving on with Slido. Bill, did you want to give a bit more context about this particular question?
Adoption activities. So a lot of interest around adoption and extension in the workshops. I suppose the two, I'm kind of preempting things a bit here, but two that stood out for me were that people continually expressed interest in was peer-to-peer networks. So implementing and maintaining those networks of knowledge exchange on the ground, and as I suppose that network being an end in itself, and trying to support that, and let that network find the information it needs to, rather than it being a sort of information focused, getting this information to people. And then I suppose the other thing was the translation of research and knowledge into business systems. So, a lot of research gets done about production or soil health or water efficiency or whatever, but it's putting all of that together and demonstrating that it is a viable business model over a wet and dry cycle. And then, of course, there's the advisors and the expertise and building trust and some sort of qualifications perhaps for people acting as advisors, because there's so many different fields that advice can be provided in, from economics through to herbicides, soils, and everything in between.
It's a lot of really good suggestions and answers coming through here. So I'm going to make a captain's call and probably skip question 5 and give people a little bit more time on this one, because we still want at the end to give you those ranking options again of your top 10 identified focus areas and get you to pick your top 3 out of those. So a little bit more time on this, just because this is terrific. This is really good feedback for us. And then we'll skip ahead to re-ranking.
All too often adoption is regarded as a bit of an optional add-on, and I think it's to the credit of the Future Drought Fund that it's putting so much focus on this adoption challenge, which, if you're going to do it well, it can be quite complicated, expensive and time-consuming in order to get the right outcomes.
Absolutely. So our final activity for the workshop is to rethink these priorities. Apologies that I was driving the slides and I skipped through this a little bit too quickly at the start, but just to show you there, out of the 21, the highlighted ones are the ones that you as a community have ranked as the top 10. And based on what we've heard today in the discussion, we'd just like you to look at that and consider those, and out of that top 10, thinking also not just about them as a list, because we did provide them to you fairly quickly on Tuesday and didn't really have as much time as we have today to provide that context. Thinking not only about the focus areas themselves, but how they fit in with those priority directions and where those linkages are. So some of them do overlap quite strongly. You might want to choose 2 or 3 that do connect very closely, or you might want to choose ones that are separate, relying on the links to sort of bring the entire theme through as a priority. I think, considering we've only got 4 minutes left in our 1 hour, it might be time to move on to the re-ranking. So, if you scan through these, try not to read them in order if you can. Otherwise, we might be prejudiced with a little bit of a donkey vote there. Have a look at those 10 on your Slido poll. But what I'm also going to do, I'm assuming that you can all see the Slido and you don't need to have a look at it here in real time, is keep this slide up so you can have a closer look at how they fit into those priority directions and where the linkages are. And then we'll give you 3 minutes on this to choose your top 3. So we're coming right up on the hour now. I'll hand back over to Bill.
Okay, thanks, Katie. A little bit of change there. I suppose the major ones are still there, but some of those social ones creeping up is in the importance there. So anyway, yeah, we do want to thank everybody for your participation in all the polls and all the sessions. It's been really great for us to hear from you. There's a lot that we can now work into the investment plan, and we really hope it's going to be useful for everybody in the hubs here. So once again, from all of us, thank you for participating in the workshops and everything up to now. And we hope you enjoy the investment plan. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much indeed to our colleagues from Alluvium. That's Katie, Bill and Tim. And it's conversations, answers to questions, informing the further conversation. And it's really down into the granular detail and seeing where we're about to go to. And that's what we've been talking about for 3 days. Now, we had scheduled the Future Drought Fund's innovation grants next, but unfortunately we've had to cancel that item on our agenda as the grant guidelines are still being finalised. But more information on the innovation grants is coming soon, and keep checking in at Future Drought Fund website for updates, and the web address is in the comments. So keep a weather eye open for that. As I said, I think a little bit earlier on, we've been together, I think it's 22 hours since Tuesday morning, and now it's time to wrap it all up. And to help us wrap it all up, we're going to just travel a little bit up the street here in Canberra to the department offices on Marcus Clark. Lynn O'Connell is there. She is hot foot from a meeting, so thank you so much for making time. Lynn, if you'd like to make your closing remarks, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Andy. And thank you, everyone, for your contribution to the inaugural Science to Practice Forum and the focus for this year's theme on building the foundations of drought resilience. So this kind of hybrid arrangement, I know it's been a bit challenging for both presenters and participants, but in the end, with the changing COVID circumstances, it's worked really well. It's been COVID safe and it's reduced our carbon footprint. Now, a few quick stats. Now, these are stats from end of yesterday, so they will change once we get the end of today's stats as well. But throughout the 2 days to end of yesterday, we had 842 registered participants. 342 was the peak attendance at a particular point in time. And there's been about 270 on average people attend during all the various different sessions. So that's a 74% turnout rate, which is pretty good, and 45% of attendees online at any time of day. And the biggest number of all is, of course, the number of comments. I've been one of the participants and seen the comments and the discussion take place. So as of close of business yesterday, there were 874 comments from participants. And I'm sure, as I've said, that's been completely overtaken today and no doubt well exceeded the 1,000 mark. So I've really been pleased to see how you've maximised these 3 days, taking on board lots of new ideas and forging new networks that will transform our ag industries and regional communities to become more drought resilient. We've seen each of the hubs in focus and how they'll contribute to drought resilience and innovation in the regions, but also how they'll do things nationally as well. And we've had lots of experts share their ideas on how to bridge the gap between research and then the practical impact on the ground for farmers and communities. We've also heard how the hubs can incorporate Indigenous knowledge into perspectives for drought resilience activities. And really now, I guess it's up to all of us to take a look at the priorities and innovations arising from the forum and to start building the foundations for drought resilience by putting things into practice, continuing to collaborate, continuing to work together. And really this means kind of our hubs too, reaching out to farmers, the researchers, the business owners, industry, community representatives, and inviting all to share knowledge and contribute to particular solutions for local and point-specific problems. So I'm really excited to hopefully see the contributions that will be made as a follow-up to this forum over the last 3 days. Now, a quick advert. It's going to be an annual forum, so you want to mark in your calendars for March next year, March 2022. That's when we'll be holding our next year's forum, and it'd be great to see the progress and the development from the Drought Innovation Hubs in this new era of building drought resilience. I also just want to briefly mention that today, coincidentally, being the 1st of July, is the first year anniversary of the Future Drought Fund. So it's a great time to be concluding the Science to Practice Innovation Forum, which is part of the products and services that come from that Future Drought Fund. And so on behalf of my colleagues in the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, I want to thank everyone for your participation, thank the speakers for all the effort that they put into their presentations, thank all the members of the hubs, and thank my team for help organising. Thank you, Andy, and your team for comparing, etc. And look forward to seeing you in next year's event. Thanks, and back to you, Andy.
Thanks so much, Lynn. And we knew it was 1 year on for FDF because we have had cake. So thank you for winding up our forum, and thanks to all the people in the hubs, those who've appeared, those who've attended. Some people have been able to attend in person, and also there have been people you haven't seen in all those hubs who have wrangled technology to help us get this event up. We really thank them. It's been close to the mark at times, but we got there, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We'd also like to thank all the speakers, many of whom had to go with the flow. There were people in states they never imagined they were going to be in, talking about their own state and vice versa. It was quite remarkable. Talking of remarkable, if you'd like to tell us how remarkable you think the event has been, and we'd love you to do that, there is a survey. There's always a survey at the end of a conference or a forum. There's a link in chat, and that will help make the next forum in 2022 in March even better. And isn't it great to have something to look forward to coming up in less than a year's time? How we do it, we'll find out down the track. I'd like to reiterate Lynn's thanks to the Future Drought Fund team, not just here alongside us in the studio, but also in the department, not just in Canberra, but around the country. They've done a lot of work to get us to this point. And it is invidious to single out anybody out of a big team, but I'm going to be invidious. I'd like to thank Narelle from FDF, and I'd like to thank Annabelle and Ben from Content Group on the technical side, because without them, I wouldn't be sitting at this table, I'd be rolling on the floor. It's been a real pleasure to have been with you for these 20 plus hours. Thank you all for coming to the table. Keep sitting around those tables, keep having those amazing conversations. Thank you for hopping in. And remember, look up at the sky, look down at the ground. See you next time.